Hey guys, I'm going to get into a film that has perhaps affected me the most ever since, in a very particular kind of way, ever since a film like Phantom Thread, as well as Everybody Wants Some. This is a film that really kind of brings just what I think Richard Linklater was kind of laying out to a completely original kind of foundation. And this is a film that really does kind of get into a complicated angle of like a romance that wasn't meant to be together, but basically it plays out in a lifetime span. So basically, like when they're growing up, they meet and they have a certain unique kind of chemistry that they didn't realize yet was true love until they got older. And basically, a woman's already in a deep relationship, getting married with this guy, and seems like a cool guy. That's the thing about it. And then you have this guy coming in. He hasn't seen this woman in like 10 years, and all of a sudden, he's just kind of almost just end up and they almost end up having a bond of chemistry that's like awkwardly almost that feels just as good basically as it is with like the old guy. Basically, this is like a canvas that was never fully expanded. So this is like a very quiet tragedy. It reminds me a lot of the film Before Midnight, particularly its tragedy, where it's just you feel the ultimate sense of this love triangle almost building in the air by way of this. um, you have this just again like this guy just comes all the way out to New York City from Japan literally to meet this woman. They end up having this like some just amazing conversations. They kind of feel like a certain perfect whenever they're together, and then of course they come to this guy, and then it's like what this film is so successful at doing is just making it come to. Because I think this kind of scenario happens to a lot of people. Like, it certainly happened to me. So I mean, this is common. I think this happens to thousands of people, and this is about the best one I've ever seen at relaxing that particular awkward position you could say where you end up meeting someone. It's like, wow, we're having a perfect moment, but you can't expand that any further because literally like that every bit of joy you're feeling would hurt the feelings of the man she's with. So I mean, that is an awkward place to be, quite literally. So um you kind of get this moment whenever all three of them are together, and it's just like literally you kind of start to you sympathize with both of them at the exact same time because literally no one's doing anything wrong in the situation. That's what's crazy about it. Literally no harm is done to anyone whatsoever in this film. It's actually completely peaceful in how it captures this whole scenario. But you just know inside there's just something really uncomfortable. Like they don't want to be around each other for a very long period of time. And the reason why is because, well, that guy fears that the boyfriend fears that he's going to over dominate with his superior. It might be something of a superior vision of love that might come out and stuff like it. It's like just so much to be insecure about, and this makes it like to where the point where it's just like, okay, we just can't get too close basically. So like there's just a lot of suppressed emotions that start to come out here, and you completely isolate with the lonely person the entire way through. And there's just a very original kind of care that the character has for this very awkward situation, to a point where, okay, like this happens so much like literally there's just sort of that melancholic acceptance of like, okay, well, we simply cannot expand this canvas kind of thing. So I really love this film, and I think it's quite perfect because it had to sit on me for a little bit because it almost like it ends so jarringly, and it feels like an ultimate nothing happens kind of film. But honestly, it's just one of those like simplistic everything's happening at the same time. That's how Linklater feelings. This is like the 2010s era of Linklater. It reminds me of particularly like Before Midnight, really. And there's a melancholic tragedy, except for the fact like one man's case he gets to this woman, but perhaps he's haunted by the fact that okay, there's a whole other man who could have had this whole ocean that I'm getting, while the lonely man is basically just like haunted because well there's an ocean he could have been with. It's like if they could have just spoken up a little more about this particular feeling, whenever they were younger. But it's really peaceful in how it just makes you kind of just feel okay about these emotions of realizing this happens to thousands of millions of people. Honestly, this is about the most common kind of scenario, and this is a huge reason why relationships are very anxiety inducing right here. Because again, I would hate to be that guy. That's what's so crazy. Even the man who's got the ocean and feels bad for the guy, I would kind of not want to be in that position just as much. And the film kind of portrays a really uncomfortable feeling behind all this, and so it just makes you feel sympathetic for both sides in the end. Okay, we're all good. You're all good humans. You just did something wrong. Like it might maybe meeting up at this in this awkward kind of way because it was an accident because literally it just accidentally was just about the most perfect thing ever. And then, well, that's a challenge for the man who's in his position, kind of thing. So I mean, the film's perfect at being minimalistic. It kind of just helping yourself sort of lend your own self into it in a lot of ways. And I mean, I love the pacing and editing. And the more I sat on, like I said, I had to sit on it a little bit because it's just like this film ends so jarringly that like whenever you kind of just leave it, I don't know. It took me a few hours to seek it in. It's like, whoa, like just it felt, okay. I feel like I've been here before. So this kind of makes me feel 100%. And I already was feeling extremely comforted about a lot of this, although I love to look at it because that is kind of like a place that by nature is like a place it's like a position that's different than you. You get mystified by the man who is in that in a certain kind of ocean, you could say. And because I've never been in that kind of ocean, so it's fascinating. I feel like I relate a lot to this man. If like I don't think he's had any other much other exposure to women, so I think that's where perhaps I like that. I love that ambiguous ending because it makes you look at yourself. It's like, well, do you want to feel this way? Almost kind of sense. If you don't get to have that ocean, and it's just like, no, I'm gonna do whatever it takes to feel my own ocean until I get, something. Like I don't, it's a side thing. It's a cherry on top. I believe personally, but I understand it's more. Well, it could become more if I just open up my insecurity, but I would need to get there to see that. So I'm gonna have to do the best with what I got here until then. And this film is a great exploration of just, it made me feel really peaceful about, a final men's of peace with it. Yeah, that whole situation, any other situation to move forward, really, it's just like, man, it's just because it's like past lives just does kind of bring, I think the horror of getting too close to people always is to me. There's the anxiety that I won't be able to extend the canvas as deep as it could go with the person. And I feels like the flawed tragedy of that can be extremely overwhelming. So it'll make memories stick with you in strange ways of like, oh, okay, I would have done this had I known that now. But the thing is, I come to peace with things because, and what this film is portraying is like, this happens when the two are growing up. So if I were watching this or like, I think what I would, think now is just like, okay, well, back then I didn't have the knowledge or really understanding of love to go for something like that. I think that's what happened to this kid too. It's almost like you're too focused on your future. You're too worried about like little things like, okay, I'm going to school. I got things I need to set myself up for, which I didn't end up going too much doing not too much of the school thing. But, but at the time it's like, if I think I had known that, I would have been a little more lucid, more open to love, but I wasn't thinking about love until I got in my 20s. So, this is what happens. But okay, well, now we've met, and this is so perfect as perhaps the feeling of actually being in the ocean would be in that small time. So, I mean, there's certainly a feeling of an undeniable melancholy of, okay, well, that canvas could not have been expanded further. So it kind of has to go full circle of just like, yeah, I mean, and this film is just kind of putting, I'm not going to need to give my perspectives, but let me just say they're optimistic simply. Assure you. Because it's like meant to be angel kind of thing. But basically, like, the film doesn't really show all that. It just literally shows the situation in the moment, basically. And it's a perfect film at doing it. I recognize it. I thought about it for days. I was like, okay, well, that just literally reminded me of that whole situation and just gave me the best perspective ever on it, of just looking at it from both sides of it. It's like, sometimes that's the confusion. Okay, well, what's the man in the ocean? You don't get to see the sorrow. So it's like in your eyes, all you see is, okay, happy all the time because he's got that ocean. But I know he's not. But I don't get to know what the substance of what lives there. So it's like I get a you feel a certain like frustration of like, oh damn, but that's where you got to find your own, find your own ocean. That's kind of the idea that that kind of dominance can lay on a band. It's just like, how can I got to feel that way for myself in everything I do. Otherwise, there's like a certain feeling you get when you get older of rotting. And that's the opposite, death, the complete death. And I think looking at death is what makes me feel so alive, because to perceive scenarios like this and to see memories that could have been further expanded by a canvas, but were not. It is like a funeral to me, I think. And I think I accepted that like back in 2013, around when Before Midnight came out. Actually, I remember often kind of just perceived. I think I fell in love with the dead, you could say, that year. Because I think it was the tragedy of, okay, well, memories were presented to me that were perfect, and we had great perfect moments at times, and then as time passes, it's like there's almost a devastation of we couldn't have taken that further because other things in life came around. But then you come back and it's like, well, that core moment is so perfect. Oh, I wanted that more all along. So it's a bit of a quarter life crisis that can kick in from all this. But yeah, I mean, that's Past Lives. I highly recommend this film, and it's quite perfect at getting straight to the point of this kind of awkward situation, and kind of just making you come to your own conclusions of how you want to walk from there, which just made me go all over the place. A really great way. I really felt perfect. This is the best film I've seen in 2023 so far, and best film to come out since Tar, honestly. Yeah, I highly recommend Past Lives to everybody. It's a highly, highly recommended